Fuck out of here.
We need to bring back random street crime dealers. And I was like, what the fuck am I supposed to do with that? It was like the industry.
And he was dead.
I think it's a free-for-all. I think there's too much going on in New York City. People get influenced and pulled away from each other and pulled back to each other.
Love? Oh, lordy.
Probably the most destructive thing as well.
Like the most beautiful women in the world live here.
New York guys seem to think that, why settle down? You know, first of all, they think they can have a baby when they're 70, so they're trying to fuck till they're 55. And even if they can't fuck, and believe me, a lot of them can't fuck, New York guys, they just sort of think that the world's at their fingertips. I mean, so what if they piss me off? They can literally leave, go to the bar, and in a New York minute, they can find somebody else who's willing to go home, give them a blowjob, and let them sleep on their couch because they're homeless. I mean, it's an actual problem.
If it's a drama, they're like, whoop, next, you know.
I feel about love, my kids, my husband, 29 years, my grandkids.
And we're all lonely. I mean, the reason why I sometimes, you know, fill that void with sex is because, you know, it's because whatever, I don't have love. And sometimes sex sort of feels, you know, it feels close enough to love, I guess.
It's 4-to-1 here. You know, 4 girls to 1 guy. It's insane, the numbers. That's why women have a hard time dating, and there's a lot of sex here in the city.
I think one year I kept track. It was 1981. Because the year before I hadn't kept track, and a friend of mine talked about it. And that year I slept with 361 different women.
Well, New York sex is a very complicated subject. I mean, it's, you know, because you have every kind of variety known to man.
And I meet people all the time. They're like, oh, the guy's gay, you know? I'm like, so what? Why? You gonna run away with him or something, you know?
And I think if you look at the gay thing, when they were repressed in their own way, they basically ran a lot of New York culture. The clubs, the fashion, the art. I mean, they were a dominant part of it. Now they're just a bunch of Joe Schmoes like everybody else. And why is it so important to be a Joe Schmo? Why does everybody want to be normal? I'm tired of normal. I hate normal. I mean, normal for me is boring.
New York makes sex like more of like a gritty, grimy, who you are as a person.
Preoccupies people so much, but they don't fully know how to even do it.
This dude, and he fucking pulled out a vial of coke, and we were fucking around. He pulled out a vial of coke, and he like, you know, put a line on his dick, and he's like, there. And I was like, what the fuck am I supposed to do with that? It was like the craziest. It was actually really kind of funny because, you know, I don't sniff. I'm not a big drug user, but it was just like, what movie did you watch? What New York fantasy do you have that I'm about to do a line off your fucking dick? So
Try to be a lot selective in New York. It's not healthy, but human beings don't necessarily do what's healthy. I went to school right downtown, and yeah, we heard the plane go over, the second plane go over our school, and I saw the buildings collapse.
It was like walking down the street, and the fire station that was like in my neighborhood, you'd walk by it and you'd look in and there'd just be one guy, and you couldn't really look at him because if you did, you just start to cry, or he'd say, I mean, it was like really. It was so far out. It was really far out.
Immediately, my mother thought of a friend of hers as a fireman on Lafayette Street. So we went from my school to the firehouse to see if he was working that day. And we looked into the garage where they keep the firemen's cars, and we saw his car was there. And he was a really nice, special person. And, you know, we didn't really know exactly what was going on that day, but we knew people were dying all around us. And, you know, and I saw that, you know, my mom just collapsed and knew somebody that really mattered passed away that day, saving people's lives.
I've been living on the Lower East Side for so many years. In the first years in the 70s, the late 70s, I couldn't leave my house without looking out the window to see what was going on. There were drive-by shootings.
And you could just walk down the street and basically step over someone who was dead.
We had a dead person in front of our door on Christmas Day, and it's just like, yeah, it used to be way more apparent than it is at the moment.
Regarding death in New York, the king gets put in the box with the pawn at the end of the game, and that's it.
It was a complicated situation. I heard all this screaming. I ran outside, and so this older man had been knocked down by this younger Hispanic kid. And I saw in the old man's hand, he was clutching this thing, which was an inhaler for asthma. So the kid says to me, he says, well, he ran into my grandmother and he was spitting on her. So of course that meant that he had to retaliate, but he didn't really beat the hell out of the guy. I think what happened is that the guy was going into an asthma attack, and probably, salivating and things, and so the kid interpreted that as bumping into him and, harassing his grandmother and spitting on her. Really what he was trying to do was use this inhaler. So I looked down and I saw the inhaler. So from my eyes, I had it figured out what was happening. In the end, the kid, they eventually came in and prosecuted him and said he murdered the guy. And I think really the guy died from lack of oxygen and the fact that he couldn't breathe. Because when the ambulance was coming in, the cops finally showed up and they were giving him CPR, and he came back to life, and they kept on saying to the ambulance, we need oxygen. And I was going like this because Alice had videotaped it out the window, that later part of it, and they didn't have it. So I picked the guy up off the ground and I tried to put him on the side of this car, and I watched his nose. It went from down here to up here. It turned blue. It was like a thermometer. And there's this blue just went up like that. And he was dead.
New York City is your ethnicity, is your culture.
Well, I'm a black Jew. I'm a black Jew from the Upper West Side. Or actually, rather, a nice black Jewish girl from the Upper West Side.
It's a touchy subject right now because everybody's pretending that that we aren't having race relation problems, but we definitely are.
We think that just because we live in this downtown bubble and it's so multicultural, that it doesn't matter. And because of that, it does.
I did notice this one thing one time when my son was sick and we were at the hospital. And if there ever was a difference between any race, it all went away when you were next to another person or family with their baby, and both babies are sick, and then you just realize you're exactly the same.
Political correctness, sometimes it's gone a little overboard.
Not that there aren't some crackers out there that are really opposed to Obama just because he's black, but the reality is the majority of the people voted in a black president. That's just the reality of it.
And it's not about race, it's just about have and have-nots.
Race here doesn't matter. It's more about status.
So it's now about money, not necessarily about race.
You weren't on Instagram selfieing to the point of stupidity. It wasn't all about you.
In the old New York, you watched your fucking mouth because you never knew who was gonna fucking punch you in the face if you said something that was out of line.
I was bartending at Club Berlin, which is an after-hours club in the early 80s. And a lot of the Hells Angels like to hang out there, and they were quite fond of us bartenders. They were very, very protective of us. And one night, in the middle of the rush, I had some asshole wave me down, and I'm busy working, went over to him, can I just have some water, please? So I guess I might have rolled my eyes. And I gave him a glass of water, and he took it and he threw it in my face. So our friends and our protectors, just one yoke, pulled him right out, threw him down the stairs. And I'm not really sure what happened to him after that, but that would be my favorite old-timey story from New York.
Rich, poor, famous drug dealers, skaters, Hells Angels, all meshed together.
There were real dangerous motherfuckers. There were mobsters from all different nationalities, and they'd spend their money in the clubs. And they didn't bother much. They didn't piss where they ate.
Anyway, some guy, Jamaican dude, got thrown out of the bar, and we were like, wow, he got like really stomped. And he showed back around. It was like an old Vietnam rifle, like an M60, and he shot the front of the club, and anybody who knew just went whoosh, and everybody else is just kind of like didn't know what to do. They were just like in awe.
And one day my club was a mess. It was a dangerous club. And I said to Andy one day, because the toilets weren't working, nothing was working. I said, Andy, I'm sorry, the toilets aren't working, and it's a mess, and the crowd's terrible tonight. And he said to me, he said, Steve, any place that's too neat or too clean can't be any fun.
The real truth is, if you went to the elementary school across the street from where I live, you could ask a kid in grade 1 who sells drugs in your building, and he would know.
I had a fight with a kid who beat me up, and my dad was vexed. My dad hated his dad, so my dad got real. My dad's like, just threatened to beat me up if I don't go back and beat this kid up. And out of fear, I beat the kid up. And then the kid's dad happened to be there and pick him up from school, and his dad shook me around, hit me in the face. And of course, if my dad hates you, and the little history of my dad was a Golden Glove boxer, so he knew how to fight. He also was a drug dealer, so people had fear of him and respect him. He was a good man. Well, if you want to call that a good man, but in the neighborhood, he was a good man. My dad saw the kid outside with me, and he saw his dad, and told me to go up there and hit the kid, and I hit the kid. And for the dad grabbed me, and my dad grabbed him and beat him up. And my dad continued to hit him, and rip his shirt off, pull his pants off, and continue to beat him up. And then the teacher stopped it, and everybody just watched, and basically don't fuck with Papa's kid. And this kid's dad was knocked out on the ground, no pants, no shirt. And the teachers were just like, let's go inside. And that was it. And the cops didn't come or nothing.
All you see is these like frat kids, like college dudes. That party! It's like, oh man,
And no matter where you are now, how much money you have or you don't, locals always rule.
Fuck out of here. You know, I'm gonna fucking punch those dudes in the face.
You know, in a lot of ways when things happen, and what makes the collective really important, a lot of times it's the boring shit. You know, where they're sitting around for 3 hours talking BS in Motor City, all of a sudden somebody comes up with an idea.
As soon as they find their little place, their little neighborhood, then somebody's gonna buy them out.
So when you break up all of these groups, you're really breaking up the brain cells, the brain thrusts of a lot of things that made America great.
In that area we had a boys club. My kids used to be in boys club. They had everything in there for those boys. They went to camp, they went to school, they paid for my kids' schooling. They closed that down.
It's not by accident, and then I could get into the whole thing of it being the man and the white man and blah blah blah, but it's just about money. Make everybody afraid, keep them thinking that they should be worried about what Miley Cyrus is doing, so they don't notice what's really going on.
I think it's getting more and more difficult to live life the way you like to, and to control your own life. It's almost impossible.
It's not fair.
First of all, we need to bring back random street crime.
There's a church on my block that kept the block clean throughout, all the trials and tribulations of the neighborhood. And there's a Ukrainian community that still frequents that church, even though a lot of them have moved out. And a couple months ago, I'm walking down the street, and there was one of the old monks talking to one of the little old ladies who had come to a morning mass. And yes, the little old lady's wig was kind of off kilter. And yes, the monk was in robes that probably had seen better days, but they were part of the neighborhood, and they were the part of the neighborhood that made it safe enough for me to actually move onto that block when I did 22 years ago. So I'm carrying a bag of laundry, I'm walking up the block, and there are these two young white girls that must be from NYU coming up the block in front of me, and they pass by the monk and the old lady, and they pass by them, and I'm right behind them, I can hear them, and one of the girls says to the other one, when we get a little bit out of earshot of the monk, and I'm like, God, look at that fucking freak. I wanted to punch her in her fucking face, because I was like, yo, you know what? Those freaks, that freak that you just referenced is why you're able to fucking move to this block and pay $4,000 for a studio. They kept it safe. And they were on this block before you ever were, and you should fucking respect them.
If they got their ass kicked, they wouldn't be doing that.
New York City is not just, you know, the island and the landscape around it. It's the mentality, it's the movement, it's that flow. And if you can't keep up with that flow, you're harassing everyone else's flow. And if you start messing with people's flow in New Yorker, then they become the cliche, dickhead, rude New Yorker. New Yorkers aren't rude, they're busy. And they're busy because they have to be. Because if you're not busy in New York, you're done.
Where do those hipsters come from? I thought that was going to last like 5 minutes.
There's just this disgusting society of hipsters that I want to burn.
We are destined for a dark victory at best, and probably worse, you know. And we realize it.
Anyway, back onto the best. What's the best?
It hits the reset button for me every fucking day.
This is where my home is. How lucky am I?
I love New York so much that I rarely leave it.
Regardless of what's going on, you drive over the bridge or come through the tunnel and it's exhilarating.
The best of New York is without a doubt the people.
Everything, every fucking day that I wake up living in this city, I'm like so psyched.
Everything that happens in the world happens here first.
I fucking love this city so much.
I have 3 beautiful, handsome boys. I won't say their age, but they're all grown. My youngest son is his last year in college. He just got, yesterday they sent him a thing for to get his master's in writing. So we're blessed with that. Overall, we're blessed.
You know, this city to me has always been, you know, a friend.
There's something really, magical.
You know, if my life in the end is worthwhile in any way, I think it's because of New York.
Happiness, life.
This is making me love New York all over again.
Seeing your friends grow up, alive, and not in jail, and have kids.
When the World Trade Center went down, the love, the help, the commonality it made me cry. I'm crying now thinking of it because it was beautiful. In its horror, there was a beauty in the way we stuck together and the way we didn't let it defeat us. When I saw that thing go down, and I was not far from it, it was really the most horrible moment of my life, and I can't get over it. But I will never move away because of what I saw afterwards. I don't cry very much. Yeah. Okay. Whatever. So that's it. The best in New York is the firemen dying that day, the police, the ambulance operators, the emergency people, and just the people helping people. It was the worst moment and the best moment. And it's why we live here.
So New York is the best.